After my death, my parents signed the organ donation papers, giving my healthy kidneys to my adopted sister, Jessica. 6 months later, Jessica married my own brother, Michael, finally completing what she'd always wanted, a real family where she belonged and I didn't. Throughout my 24 years of life, we had been locked in constant competition, and in the end, I lost everything while she gained it all. But in this strange new existence, I chose to prioritize something I'd never truly focused on before, my own happiness, and surprisingly, I found the ending I'd always dreamed of. I was reborn, transported back to the exact moment when 10-year-old Jessica first stepped through our front door. If only I had returned a few days earlier, I might have been able to prevent the warehouse fire that killed her parents, or perhaps I could have convinced my parents not to take her in through some elaborate scheme. But now that she was already standing in our living room, clutching her small suitcase with those perfectly timed tears glistening in her eyes, any dramatic interference would be pointless. Jessica was already here to stay. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Jessica was the daughter of my father's longtime business partner, Uncle Robert, who had started their restaurant venture together 15 years earlier. Robert had Jessica late in life and absolutely adored his only child, treating her like the most precious thing in the world. She showed incredible artistic talent from a young age, creating paintings that adults found remarkable for someone so small. But Jessica had been born with a rare genetic condition that caused her kidneys to gradually deteriorate, putting her on a waiting list for eventual transplantation. Her parents had spent countless hours and enormous amounts of money, seeking experimental treatments across the country, hoping against hope that something might slow the progression of her disease. When the warehouse fire claimed both of Robert's lives in a single tragic night, 10-year-old Jessica was left completely alone in the world, facing not just the grief of losing her parents, but also the terrifying reality of managing a serious medical condition without their unwavering support and advocacy. The moment my parents first laid eyes on Jessica at the hospital, sitting small and fragile in that oversized wheelchair with medical tubes attached to her tiny arms, they made an instant decision that would change all our lives forever. She looked so vulnerable, so desperately in need of protection and love, that my mother immediately felt her maternal instincts surge with an intensity she hadn't experienced since Michael and I were babies. My father, overwhelmed with guilt over losing his business partner and closest friend, saw caring for Jessica as both an honor and a responsibility he couldn't possibly refuse. "Sarah, sweetheart, you've always told us you wanted a sister," my mother said, her voice gentle but filled with an emotion I couldn't quite identify at the time. "From now on, Jessica will be part of our family. She'll be your big sister. Isn't that wonderful?" Their faces radiated such pure joy and determination as they looked at me, clearly expecting me to embrace this life-changing announcement with the same enthusiasm they felt. In my previous life, 8-year-old me had been genuinely thrilled by this unexpected development. I thought I was gaining a sister, a built-in best friend, someone to share secrets and adventures with. I had no way of knowing that Jessica had entirely different plans for our family dynamic. Jessica wasn't interested in sharing anything, especially not my parents' love and attention. She wanted all of it for herself, and she possessed an almost supernatural ability to manipulate situations to achieve exactly what she desired. "Sarah, we know you're mature for your age," my father explained, his voice taking on that serious tone he used when discussing important family matters. "Jessica has been through terrible trauma, and her medical condition makes everything more complicated. Even though she's older, we need you to be understanding and help us take care of her. Can you do that for us?" Before I could even process this request enough to formulate a response, Jessica's eyes filled with perfectly timed tears that seemed to appear from nowhere. "I understand if it's hard for my new little sister to accept me," Jessica whispered, her voice trembling with just the right amount of vulnerability and resignation. "Who would want to share their family's love with someone like me? I could always go back to the group home if it would make things easier." Sometimes I genuinely wondered if Jessica had somehow retained memories from a previous life. Because how else could a 10-year-old child be so incredibly skilled at emotionally manipulation? Before I could even think of how to respond to her calculated display of martyrdom, she had already positioned me as the selfish, jealous one who was making her feel unwelcome in her time of greatest need. Sight of Jessica's distress immediately rushed to comfort her, wiping away those strategic tears with infinite gentleness. "Jessica, please don't cry. It's not good for your health, and you know how important it is to avoid stress. You don't need to call us Uncle David and Aunt Linda anymore. From this moment forward, we are your mom and dad." Jessica lifted her small face, those tears still sparkling on her lashes like perfectly placed diamonds, and her expression of shocked gratitude and overwhelming joy could have melted the hardest heart. "I really have a mom and dad now?" she asked, her voice filled with such wonder and happiness that anyone watching would have felt their emotions surge in response. In that pivotal moment, the three of them formed a tight circle of hugs and tears, completely lost in their emotional reunion while I stood there, feeling like an outsider looking in on someone else's family. That was Jessica's unique talent, her special kind of magic. She could instantly create intimate moments that somehow excluded me, even when I was standing right there in the same room. That very first night, my parents decided that Jessica and I would share my bedroom, moving a second bed into my space without asking how I felt about suddenly losing my privacy and personal sanctuary. I lay there in the darkness, unable to fall asleep, my mind racing as I tried to process everything that had happened and figure out how to navigate this dramatically altered family landscape. I was already planning my future, thinking about how I could become independent and eventually leave this house where I clearly no longer held the same place in my parents' hearts. I had learned from my previous life's painful experiences that once Jessica entered our world, my parents and brother gradually but inevitably became hers instead of mine. Late that night, I watched through half-closed eyes as Jessica quietly slipped out of her bed and tiptoed out of our room. I pretended to be deeply asleep while following her movements, curious about where she was going in this unfamiliar house. She made her way directly to my parents' bedroom with the confidence of someone who had been living here for years rather than ours. "Daddy, Mommy," she called softly through their door, her voice perfectly calibrated to sound frightened and helpless. "It's so dark, and my kidneys are hurting. I'm scared and I don't know what to do." My parents, their hearts immediately overwhelmed with concern and protective instincts, didn't pause to consider how Jessica had managed to navigate through an unfamiliar house in complete darkness to find their bedroom so easily, or how convenient it was that her medical condition seemed to flare up precisely when she needed sympathy and attention. They simply opened their arms to her, tears of compassion welling up in their eyes as they saw her small figure trembling in the doorway. "Jessica, sweetheart, don't be afraid. We're here now, and we'll always be here," my mother whispered, gathering Jessica into her arms like she was the most precious thing in the world. Jessica snuggled against my mother's chest with a soft sigh of contentment, then looked up at both my parents with those wide, innocent eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Daddy, Mommy, can I really stay here forever? Will you really never send me away?" The question was asked with such vulnerable hope that it pierced straight through to their hearts, making them feel like the most important people in the world. For being able to provide this lost child with security and love. Listening to this perfectly orchestrated scene from the hallway where I had quietly followed, I felt my own heart sink with a terrible certainty about what my future held. Within seconds of that touching family moment, my father stormed into my room with an expression of anger I had rarely seen directed at me before. Without giving me a chance to explain or even fully wake up from my pretended sleep, he pulled me roughly from my bed, his grip tight on my arm. "What did you say to Jessica? Why can't you be more mature and understanding? She's been through more trauma than any child should ever have to endure, and instead of supporting her, you're being selfish and mean," he scolded, his voice harsh with disappointment and frustration. My mother appeared in the doorway behind him, but instead of coming to my defense or asking for my side of the story, she remained focused on Jessica, holding her protectively while mouthing silent words to my father about being patient with Me because I was still young and needed time to adjust. They ended up taking Jessica to sleep in their room that night, leaving me standing alone in the hallway wearing nothing but my thin pajamas, shivering in the cold air conditioning. I used to check on me every single night before bed, tucking my blankets around me just right and kissing my forehead before turning off the lights. She would always make sure I felt safe and loved before leaving me to sleep. Now, suddenly they seemed to have completely forgotten that I was just an 8-year-old girl who was also afraid of the dark and cold, who also needed comfort and reassurance from her parents, especially during such a confusing and emotionally overwhelming time. Jessica pulled this same manipulation repeatedly over the following weeks and months. She would wait until the perfect moment, then suddenly claim that her kidney condition was causing her pain, or that she was feeling scared and overwhelmed. During my parents' predictable fits of compassion and concern, she would subtly plant seeds of doubt about my behavior, my attitude, or my willingness to accept her as part of the family. Yeah, she never made direct accusations. But somehow she always managed to imply that I had said or done something to make her feel unwelcome or unloved. Eventually, my young mind began to feel genuinely threatened and insecure about my place in the family. Since Jessica's arrival, I had watched myself transform in my parents' eyes from their beloved, adorable daughter into some kind of problem child who was jealous, selfish, and unable to show proper compassion for someone less fortunate. Feeling desperate to regain their approval and affection, I started competing with Jessica for every scrap of attention, trying to match or exceed everything she did in hopes of proving that I was just as worthy of their love. Jessica was a master actress, always presenting herself as kind, gentle, and selflessly devoted to others. She constantly deferred to everyone else's wishes and preferences, which only deepened my parents' sense of gratitude and indebtedness toward her. They interpreted her behavior as proof of what an exceptional, mature, and caring person she was, especially considering everything she had suffered. The more generous and accommodating she appeared, the more my own normal childhood behavior seemed selfish and immature by comparison. I spent my entire childhood and teenage years locked in this impossible battle with Jessica, and despite all my efforts, I never managed to win even a single victory. Even my beloved older brother Michael, who had always been my protector and closest confidant, eventually fell completely under Jessica's spell. The entire Portland community knew the Chen family as the generous restaurant owners who had taken in a tragically orphaned, chronically ill artistic prodigy named Jessica, and who also had a problematic, jealous biological daughter named Sarah, who couldn't seem to accept her adopted sister's presence with grace and maturity. In this new life, with all the wisdom and perspective I had gained from living through these experiences once before, I made a conscious decision to stop competing with Jessica entirely. I was going to focus on living the life I truly wanted. For myself, rather than wasting my energy trying to win a game that was rigged against me from the start, I would build my own happiness independently, without depending on my family's approval or affection for my sense of self-worth. The next morning, the sound of Jessica's laughter mixing with my parents' voices drifted up from the dining room, creating a warm, cheerful atmosphere that immediately shifted into uncomfortable tension the moment I appeared. Jessica was sitting in my usual chair at the breakfast table, using my favorite bowl and spoon to eat her cereal, looking perfectly at home in the spot I had occupied every morning for the past 8 years of my life. Upon seeing me enter the room, the lighthearted mood evaporated as if I were some kind of unwelcome intruder who had disrupted their pleasant family moment. My mother's face flushed with obvious embarrassment and guilt. "Sarah, sweetheart, you're up early today. Jessica doesn't have her own dishes yet, so she borrowed yours. Why don't you use Michael's breakfast set instead? I'll get you your own special dishes very soon." Her voice carried that overly bright tone adults use when they're trying to smooth over an awkward situation and hoping a child won't notice the unfairness of what's happening. "Actually, I'd prefer not to use other people's things," I replied calmly, making sure my voice carried just enough subtle emphasis that everyone in the room would understand exactly what I meant. The sarcasm wasn't lost on anyone present, and the atmosphere became even more tense as they realized I was making a pointed comment about Jessica's behavior, rather than simply accepting the situation gracefully. My father's expression immediately darkened with anger, his face taking on that stern, disapproving look that I remembered so well from my previous life. He was clearly still irritated about the previous night's incident, when he believed I had somehow upset Jessica and caused her medical distress. "Sarah, that's enough attitude from you. Your mother and I have been far too lenient with your behavior lately, and it's created a spoiled, inconsiderate child." I glanced around the breakfast table, taking note of all the foods that had been prepared for this meal. There was fresh milk, perfectly toasted bread, crispy bacon, fluffy scrambled eggs, all of which happened to be Jessica's favorite breakfast items. As someone who was lactose intolerant, I usually had a bowl of oatmeal or rice porridge for breakfast instead of dairy products. But apparently no one had thought to prepare anything I could actually eat. "Oh no, I completely forgot about your dietary restrictions," my mother said quickly, her voice filled with genuine distress as she realized her oversight. "Let me make you some soy milk right away, or I could prepare some of that rice porridge you like." She was clearly trying to fix the situation and demonstrate that she did care about my needs. But her attempts to compensate only highlighted how much more thought and attention had gone into accommodating Jessica's preferences than mine. With a sharp bang that made everyone jump, my father slammed his coffee mug down on the table and glared at me with unconcealed irritation. "Why are you making such a big production out of everything? We've been catering to your every whim for years, and it's turned you into an ungrateful, demanding child. We're taking Jessica to complete her school enrollment today, and we don't have time to waste dealing with your dramatics." In my previous life, a comment like that would have devastated me emotionally. I would have broken down in tears, thrown a tantrum, or done something equally dramatic to try to get my parents' attention and make them realize how much their words had hurt me. But now, having lived through all of this before, I felt nothing but a strange sense of emotional numbness. I understood that nothing I said or did would change their priorities or make them treat me with the same consideration they showed Jessica. I quietly took a seat in the corner of the breakfast table, as far away from the rest of the family as possible, and observed their interactions with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. I noticed that Jessica was eating her breakfast with a small, satisfied smile playing around the corners of her mouth, clearly pleased with how thoroughly she had managed to displace me from my normal position in the family. But by the time she looked up and made eye contact with me, her expression had already transformed into one of profound sadness and concern. "Daddy, please don't say such harsh things about my little sister," Jessica said, her voice trembling with emotion and righteousness. "She's not spoiled or ungrateful. She's just had everything she wanted her whole life because you and Mommy love her so much. Of course, it's difficult for her to suddenly have to share that love with someone like me. She's acting this way because she cares about your relationship, not because she's a bad person." My saintly parents were immediately moved to tears by this display of Jessica's generous, forgiving nature and her mature understanding of complex family dynamics. Here was their adopted daughter, who had lost everything and was fighting a serious medical condition, defending the biological daughter who seemed incapable of showing her basic kindness or acceptance. Meanwhile, I sat there representing everything that was wrong with privileged children who took their blessings for granted and couldn't find it in their hearts to share with those less fortunate. The disappointed, ashamed looks my parents gave me were now tinged with deep disappointment and bewilderment about how they had managed to raise such a selfish, ungrateful child. But their disapproval didn't bother me anymore, because I had learned from my previous life that this was exactly how this story would unfold. I knew that no matter what I did or said, I would always be cast as the villain in Jessica's carefully constructed narrative about our family dynamics. When my parents returned home later that day after completing Jessica's school registration and enrollment procedures, they discovered that I had already moved all of my belongings out of my childhood bedroom and into the small room that had previously been used for storage and as quarters for the restaurant's live-in help during busy seasons. I wasn't making this change to accommodate Jessica or to be generous and understanding. I was simply trying to create my own private space where I could focus on my goals and plans without constantly being reminded of how much my family preferred my adopted sister to me. My father gently patted my head with what seemed like genuine approval and pride. "Sarah, You're being so mature and understanding about this whole situation. You're showing us what it really means to be a good daughter." A younger version of myself might have felt proud and happy to receive such praise from him, but having lived through all of this before, I understood exactly what his words actually meant. I was being a good daughter specifically because I was accommodating Jessica's needs and desires at the expense of my own comfort and happiness. Being good, in their definition, required me to constantly sacrifice myself for Jessica's benefit. Without asking permission, or even knocking, Jessica barged into my new room to inspect my living situation and see how I had arranged my belongings in the smaller space. When she noticed the complete set of professional art supplies that my parents had bought for me the previous Christmas, her face instantly turned pale and she threw herself dramatically into my mother's arms, sobbing as if her heart was breaking. "I want to be able to paint and create art just like my little sister," Jessica cried, her voice filled with longing and despair. "I want to do it without having to worry about my condition or wonder if today might be the last day I can hold a paintbrush." My mother looked at me with an expression of pained guilt, hesitating for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking the words I had been expecting to hear. "Sarah, sweetheart, I'm so sorry to ask this of you, but would you mind putting away your art supplies for now? It's just too difficult for Jessica to see them when she can't use them herself because of her medical limitations." And there it was again, the same pattern that had defined my entire previous life. Since Jessica's arrival, my world had been steadily shrinking, my interests and hobbies gradually stripped away, and even my dreams and aspirations sacrificed. On the altar of Jessica's comfort and emotional well-being, this was exactly how it had played out before. Jessica's kidney condition meant that she couldn't engage in activities that required sustained focus or energy, so I was expected to curtail my own artistic pursuits to avoid making her feel bad about her limitations. Despite being the daughter of parents who owned and operated one of Portland's most successful restaurants businesses, I couldn't freely purchase art supplies or attend painting classes because doing so might upset Jessica and remind her of everything her illness prevented her from enjoying. Yet somehow Jessica was allowed to sit comfortably with my father during his free time, learning basic artistic techniques and receiving gentle, patient instruction. Each of her simple drawings and paintings was carefully framed and displayed prominently throughout our house, while my more advanced and technically skilled work was buried at the bottom of boxes in the storage room, hidden away where no one would ever see it, and Jessica wouldn't be reminded of her limitations. Right there in front of my mother and father, I picked up that expensive set of art supplies and deliberately threw every single item into the trash can. Watching their faces as I destroyed something they had spent considerable money purchasing. For me, my father's expression darkened immediately, his jaw clenching with barely controlled anger. But he seemed to understand on some level that they had pushed me too far and couldn't legitimately punish me for disposing of my own belongings. The summer heat arrived early in Portland that year, and with it came my brother Michael's return from Stanford University.
Ow.
Jessica had been preparing for this moment for weeks, carefully planning her appearance and behavior to make the perfect first impression. When Michael walked through our front door, she was positioned artfully in the living room, wearing a pale blue dress that emphasized her fragile appearance, surrounded by her kidney dialysis equipment and medical charts. She had deliberately arranged the scene to look like she was bravely managing her complex medical routine without wanting to burden anyone, creating an image of tragic beauty that would immediately appeal to Michael's protective instincts. The moment she noticed him watching her organize her medications, she covered her face with embarrassment and began gathering up the medical supplies with trembling hands. "You must be Michael," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry you have to see all this medical equipment. I know it's unpleasant to be around someone who's constantly dealing with health problems. I was just trying to prepare for my evening treatment, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable in your own home." Jessica's performance was flawless, presenting herself as brave, selfless, heartbreakingly vulnerable, while simultaneously hinting that I was somehow the source of family tension. She managed to convey without saying it directly that I had trouble accepting her presence, that she was constantly walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting me, and that she felt like an unwelcome intruder despite my parents' kindness. Michael was immediately captivated by this delicate, ethereal girl who seemed to embody every romantic ideal he had ever read about. She looked exactly like the tragic heroines from the classic novels he studied in his literature classes. The kind of character who inspired noblemen to dedicate their lives to protection and devotion. Within minutes of meeting her, he felt an overwhelming urge to shield Jessica from any additional pain or hardship. Our parents eagerly suggested that we spend a day together as a family to help Michael get acquainted with Jessica and celebrate his homecoming. I had absolutely no interest in participating in this forced bonding experience. They functioned perfectly well as a complete family unit without me. My presence would only create awkwardness and highlight the underlying tensions that everyone preferred to ignore. But Jessica couldn't simply let the situation proceed naturally. She retreated to the corner of our living room and began crying those perfectly formed tears that seemed to appear on command. Her voice trembling with noble sacrifice, as she spoke just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Mom, Dad, you should take Michael and Sarah out together for your family reunion," she whispered, each word carefully calculated for maximum emotional impact. I would only spoil such a special occasion. You haven't seen Michael in months, and this should be precious time for your real family to reconnect without having to worry about including an outsider like me. Her words were designed to make my parents feel guilty for potentially excluding her while simultaneously painting me as the reason she felt unwelcome. Michael immediately rushed to her side, his protective instincts fully activated as he gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with infinite tenderness. "Why would you say something like that?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. "You're part of this family now, Jessica. We're not going anywhere without you." He was already completely under her spell, and I could see that familiar look of devoted admiration forming in his eyes. Jessica pretended to shy away from his touch while shooting a meaningful glance in my direction, communicating without words that I had somehow made her feel like an outsider. Her body language and facial expression clearly suggested that my attitude was the problem, that I had been cold or cruel to her when no one else was watching. Michael turned to me with barely controlled anger, his protective instincts now focused entirely on defending Jessica against what he perceived as my unreasonable behavior. "Sarah, what's wrong with you? You weren't like this before Jessica came to live with us. How can you make someone feel unwelcome in their own home? Don't you have any compassion for what she's been through?" I looked directly into Michael's eyes, refusing to back down or apologize for crimes I hadn't committed. "Why don't you ask Jessica to explain exactly what I did to hurt her feelings? I've given up my bedroom, moved into the storage room, and thrown away my art supplies to avoid making her uncomfortable. What specific behavior of mine is causing all this distress?" Jessica appeared genuinely frightened when I challenged her to provide details, avoiding direct eye contact while her fearful demeanor only convinced Michael more thoroughly that I had done something terrible. Her obvious reluctance to specify my supposed wrongdoings made him assume the worst about my character and motivations. "It's your whole attitude," Michael declared angrily, completely missing the logical flaw in his argument. "Jessica lost everything she ever loved, and then she gets placed with a family where the biological daughter resents her presence. You should be going out of your way to make her feel welcome, not acting like she's an inconvenience." My parents immediately aligned themselves with Michael and Jessica, forming a united front against me as they delivered their judgment. "Sarah, your brother rarely comes home from college," my mother said with obvious disappointment. "The least you can do is apologize and try to make this a pleasant visit for everyone. We want to have a nice family day, and your negativity is ruining the atmosphere." I surveyed this family whose moral compass seemed completely reversed, where defending myself was considered wrong and where I was expected to apologize for other people's misinterpretations. "Jessica can have whatever she wants from this family," I said with complete conviction. "But I will not apologize for things I didn't do or feelings I don't have." After making that statement, I walked calmly to my room and locked the door, shutting out Michael's frustrated shouting and my parents' attempts to negotiate some kind of peace treaty. The rest of the family spent their day together shopping and dining at expensive restaurants, probably discussing what a difficult, ungrateful child I had become. Not once during their outing did anyone call to check on me or bring back food. From their adventures in my previous life, being excluded like this would have devastated me emotionally. I would have staged dramatic protests, refused to eat, or threatened to run away. Much their favoritism was hurting me. But now I understood that such theatrical gestures were completely pointless and only damaged my own well-being without changing anyone else's behavior. Instead, I made myself a satisfying meal and settled down with advanced study materials I had purchased with money earned from tutoring younger students in the neighborhood. Since my rebirth, I had been dedicating myself to serious academic work. Studying every single day to prepare for the future I was determined to create for myself. I had decided to pursue medicine rather than art, using my adult intelligence trapped in a child's body to learn at an accelerated pace that quickly surpassed Jessica's academic performance. Her manipulation tactics might work on my compassionate family, but teachers cared only about objective results and measurable achievements.
Oh, nice.
When semester grades were announced, I had achieved first place in our entire grade level, while Jessica's name appeared near the bottom of the rankings. No amount of tears or claims about medical stress could change the reality of failing test scores and incomplete assignments. Whenever Jessica's poor performance resulted in mandatory parent conferences, she would break down crying and claim that academic pressure was worsening her kidney condition. Despite these obvious excuses, Jessica refused to consider transferring to a specialized school better equipped to handle her medical needs and learning difficulties. Examination periods consistently transformed our household into a chaotic environment as everyone tiptoed around Jessica's fragile emotional state and tried to minimize any stress that might affect her health. Out of concern for Jessica's feelings and their desire to prevent any embarrassment related to her adopted status, my parents decided to attend both our parent-teacher conferences, even when scheduled simultaneously. This meant my academic achievements were always overshadowed by discussions of Jessica's struggles and special accommodations. My parents couldn't have been unaware that their obvious favoritism caused my classmates to mock and bully me, calling me the replacement daughter and the family disappointment. But whenever they had to choose between supporting me and protecting Jessica's feelings, they used the same tired justification I had heard countless times. Jessica has serious health problems and has experienced terrible trauma, they would explain, as if this justified every unfair decision. We need to be patient and understanding with her, which sometimes means you have to make sacrifices. You're healthy and strong, Sarah. You can handle disappointment better than she can. But their excuses no longer bothered me, because I had discovered that knowledge and academic excellence were forms of power that couldn't be stolen or given away. I studied intensively during every spare moment, mastering material years ahead of my grade level. And by age 12, I had advanced enough to become the youngest student in Portland's history accepted into high school. Suddenly, everyone in the city knew about the Chen family's genius daughter, though most assumed they meant Jessica rather than me. My father's phone rang constantly with calls from wealthy families, wanting to arrange meetings or discuss potential future engagements with their sons. These networking opportunities could have provided incredible advantages for my future career and social connections. But to spare Jessica's feelings and avoid making her feel inferior, my father politely declined every single advantageous opportunity. He didn't seem to understand or care how much these connections could benefit my future, because his primary concern was always Jessica's emotional comfort rather than my advancement. When my high school acceptance letter arrived, delivered personally by the principal, along with a newspaper reporter wanting to write about Portland's youngest student, my parents weren't home to witness this milestone. Jessica had complained of kidney pain that morning, and they had immediately rushed her to the hospital for emergency evaluation, forgetting completely about any other commitments. Although I had become disillusioned with my parents' priorities, I still felt sharp disappointment in that moment. This should have been one of the most celebrated days of my life, an achievement any normal parents would have been thrilled to witness and commemorate. The principal looked into my eyes with genuine concern, recognizing the pain I was trying to hide behind my mature composure. "Our school doesn't usually provide dormitory housing," she said gently, her hand resting warmly on my head. "But if you'd prefer to live on campus rather than commuting daily, I can arrange special accommodations in the faculty residence building." Her touch was so caring, and it had been so long since I had felt genuine warmth from an adult. Despite my efforts to remain emotionally detached, I couldn't prevent a single tear from escaping in front of the principal. That tear, representing years of accumulated loneliness, led me to discover two of the most important people who would ever enter my life. As the school year approached, I counted down days until I could finally escape my cold family home for campus dormitory life. On departure day, my parents were again absent, summoned to the hospital by another of Jessica's convenient medical emergencies. Michael was home briefly but offered no help with packing, simply watching with cold indifference as I loaded my belongings into a taxi. Finally, he said with obvious relief, "Maybe now we'll have some peace around here without your constant negativity and drama." He didn't lift a finger to help or even pretend to care that his younger sister was leaving home at age 12. The dormitory room the principal arranged was perfect for my needs, converted from a small faculty apartment into comfortable private living space. I spent the first day cleaning and organizing, then visited the campus bookstore for advanced study materials I would need for my accelerated program. High school coursework would be significantly more challenging, requiring even greater dedication if I wanted to maintain excellence and prepare for medical school. On the first day of classes, I wasn't surprised when fellow students immediately excluded me from their social groups. They had heard the principal bent normal rules to provide special housing, so they labeled me as someone who achieved position through connections rather than merit. "Look, it's the 12-year-old prodigy," they whispered mockingly. "Wonder if the genius gets scared staying alone in her special room. Maybe she cries for mommy when lights go out. She should sit by the water fountain during lunch." Another suggested cruelly, "I need to mix baby formula during break time." These teenagers excluded me because my presence highlighted their academic mediocrity. But to someone who had lived through worse experiences, their childish behavior seemed completely inconsequential. Despite being younger, I was taller than many classmates due to good genetics. I confidently selected a seat in the classroom center, ignoring snide comments and hostile glares from my new peers. "It must be nice having connections to choose the best seat," one muttered sarcastically. "Center position means constant teacher attention. Anyone sitting nearby gets extra scrutiny too, no thanks." Other students scattered 2 seats far from me, leaving me completely alone like some social pariah. I sat with perfect posture, ignoring their whispers, and calmly opened an advanced workbook while waiting for class to begin. Just then, someone pulled out the chair beside me and sat down with casual confidence. "Hey, you must be Sarah, right?" said, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Alex Rivera. Mind if I sit here?" I evaluated him quickly, trying to determine his motivations. He had natural charisma and good looks that usually made someone popular, the type who could fit in anywhere without needing to associate with outcasts. "Are you sure?" I asked directly, sitting with me. "We'll make others think you're seeking special treatment, or that you're a teacher's pet. You might want to reconsider." Alex laughed easily and leaned back with complete nonchalance. "Oh, they don't scare me," he said with genuine amusement. "Besides, I should mention I'm actually the principal's son. Mom probably asked me to keep an eye on you and make sure you're settling in okay." Now, I could see the family resemblance I had initially missed. Alex shared facial features with the principal, and his confident, caring demeanor reflected the same genuine warmth she had shown me. She had probably anticipated I would face social difficulties and asked her son to provide friendly support. During my transition, warmth spread through my chest. Even recognizing Alex's friendship might initially be duty-motivated rather than genuine personal interest. Even if his kindness was partly obligation, the fact that someone cared enough about my well-being to arrange this support meant more than I could express. After our first weekly examination, silenced all doubters with outstanding test scores significantly higher than any other student. Soon, classmates began approaching for help with studies and homework. And what had started as potentially difficult high school experience gradually became much more manageable. When weekends arrived and campus emptied as students went home too, families, I planned to spend free time at the library continuing advanced studies. But Alex surprised me by knocking on my door. Having coordinated with his mother to ensure I wouldn't spend weekends completely alone, both Alex and the principal knew I never went home during weekends or holidays, and they didn't want me becoming lonely or depressed from too much solitude. They had specifically invited me for special lunch outings, and their thoughtful consideration touched me deeply. After living with the Chen family, where I had learned to treasure any small kindness, the caring shown by the principal and her son felt like experiencing genuine family warmth for the first time in years. From the first day, I began spending every weekend with the principal's family. She often remarked that while pleased with my academic dedication, she worried I was becoming too rigid and focused, missing normal social experiences important for healthy development at my age. The Chen family seemed to function perfectly well without me, apparently feeling no need to maintain contact or check on my well-being. Not a single phone call came asking me home for visits, inquiring about academic progress or checking if I was happy and healthy in my new situation. While spending time with the principal's family, I gradually opened up emotionally and rediscovered natural innocence and energy normal for my age. For years, I had suppressed these impulses to navigate toxic family dynamics, where anything drawing attention to myself was viewed as selfish or immature. During one weekend conversation, the principal gently remarked, "I always wanted a daughter, and I would be thrilled if you were mine. You're such a remarkable, intelligent, caring young woman, and any parent should be proud to have you as their child." Those words touched something deep inside me that had been aching for years. I remembered overhearing my father speaking too. Jessica, in my previous life, his voice filled with love as he said, "Jessica, you have such incredible talent and beautiful spirit. I wish you were my real daughter." That memory, tears I had held back for years, finally poured out. Alex, panicked by my sudden breakdown, frantically tried wiping my tears with his sleeve while stammering apologies. "I was just kidding," he said desperately. "I'm not trying to kidnap you or anything. Please don't cry." But the principal, with years of experience working with children, immediately understood my tears weren't caused by Alex's innocent joke. She recognized deeper pain from emotional wounds inflicted by my own family's treatment. When I finally told her about Jessica's manipulation and my parents' favoritism, she was absolutely appalled. Alex, hearing how the Chen family treated me, was completely outraged. "Are you serious?" he said incredulously. "Your parents ignore their amazing, brilliant, real daughter to focus all attention on someone else. Something's seriously wrong with them. And why does Jessica always get her way? Just because she has medical problems? She's not completely disabled, so why does everyone constantly accommodate her every whim?" The principal gave Alex a gentle tap, reminding him to show appropriate sensitivity when discussing health challenges. Then she pulled me into her arms with the tender embrace of a loving mother. "From now on, consider yourself my goddaughter," she said with complete sincerity. "You are wonderful and special, and if your biological family can't recognize what an amazing person you are, that's their loss. I can see your worth clearly, and I would be honored to have you as part of my family." I cried hard in her arms, releasing years of accumulated pain and loneliness, while Alex made jokes trying to lighten the mood. "So if she's your daughter now, that technically makes us siblings, right?" He grinned. "I always wanted a sister. So this works perfectly." High school became the most peaceful, fulfilling period of my life. During summer and winter breaks, I chose to remain in dormitory, claiming I needed quiet environment for advanced studies. My parents and the Chen family didn't seem concerned about my absence or make serious efforts convincing me to come home. I learned through neighborhood acquaintances that my family spent most time shuttling Jessica to medical appointments and specialists, trying to find treatments that might slow her kidney disease progression. They also invested significantly in Jessica's artistic education, enrolling her in expensive private classes despite increasingly strained finances, sometimes neglecting restaurant business responsibilities. My monthly allowance was reduced during this period ostensibly because family finances were stretched by Jessica's medical and educational expenses. But thanks to early development of financial independence, I lived comfortably without depending on family money. Had demonstrated natural talent for recognizing valuable art and predicting market trends. In my previous life, my father and Jessica convinced me that mixing art with financial considerations was shameful, that true art lovers should be above mercenary concerns. They preached this philosophy while secretly selling pieces I had identified, making substantial profits never shared with me. This time, I saw through their hypocrisy quickly, keeping investment activities completely private from the Chen family. I only trusted my school principal to help manage my growing portfolio. Watching bank account numbers increase brought security and peace I had never experienced before. Financial independence was truly empowering. It meant never being dependent on family approval or support, never having to compromise principles, or accept mistreatment in exchange for basic necessities. This particular weekend, the principal and Alex had arranged special time for a picnic at Laurelhurst Park, one of Portland's most beautiful outdoor spaces. The principal went ahead too, fine parking while Alex and I walked across grass to find the perfect spot for our blanket and supplies. I was genuinely excited about this relaxing day with the two people who had become most important in my life. But my mood evaporated when I spotted the Chen family approaching across the park grounds. Jessica was clinging to Michael's arm, looking delicate in a flowing white dress that emphasized her fragile appearance. Behind them followed my parents, David and Linda, whom I hadn't seen face-to-face in months. When they noticed me with Alex, their cheerful expressions immediately froze into shock and confusion. Jessica, seeing me accompanied by an attractive young man, immediately hid behind Michael as if I posed some threat. She transformed instantly into a frightened flower, predictably triggering Michael's protective instincts and causing him to glare at me with hostility. "So you've been lying about studying?" Michael accused angrily. "Turns out you've just been sneaking around with boyfriends instead of focusing on education. No wonder you never want to come home or spend time with family." Alex's handsome appearance bit her lip with apparent jealousy disguised as family concern. "Sarah, are you on a date?" she asked with fake innocence. "Your parents have been so worried about you living alone at school. They miss you terribly and don't understand why you don't come home during holidays. You've changed so much since high school." My parents were shocked and horrified, staring at Alex and me as if they had caught us in scandalous behavior. "Sarah, you're far too young for romantic relationships," my mother said, voice shaking with panic. "Are you trying to drive us crazy with worry? Why can't you be well-behaved like Jessica? She would never lie or sneak around behind our backs." They took turns criticizing me, not giving even one opportunity to explain or defend myself. Despite Alex being aware of the Chen family's unfairness, he was still stunned by their immediate assumption of worst possible interpretation and complete unwillingness to listen. Just then, the principal returned from parking and approached with a warm smile. When my parents spotted her, they quickly adjusted attitudes and put on respectful faces, abandoning the hysterical anger they had been directing at me moments before. Jessica, recognizing she would be applying to school soon and knowing her academic record was poor, immediately tried presenting herself favorably. "I knew Sarah wouldn't lie about something important," Jessica said sweetly, contradicting everything she had implied seconds earlier. "She's always been honest and trustworthy." My parents also switched gears, offering awkward smiles and apologies while pretending their previous outburst never happened. They were primarily concerned about avoiding offense to the principal, who held significant educational influence in Portland, and making good impressions that might benefit Jessica's future prospects. My feelings and reputation were merely collateral. Damage in their calculations? The principal looked seriously at my parents, her sharp gaze condemning their failure as parents. "I clearly saw what happened here," she said firmly. "How can you attack Sarah without proof? You treat her like this and then wonder why she doesn't want to come home. Isn't that completely backwards thinking?" She left them with those words, taking Alex and me away from the Chen family gathering. Both the principal and Alex worried. This chaos might dampen my birthday celebration enthusiasm, but I had long given up on my biological family. What mattered was creating cherished memories with people who truly cared about me. We shared cake by the scenic lakeside, the principal gifting me a beautiful new backpack, while Alex presented a handmade bracelet. Thinking about Alex's clumsy attempts at jewelry making made me laugh, causing him to blush and jump around embarrassed. 2 years flew by quickly, and I was about to graduate high school. To completely separate from the Chen family, I decided to study medicine abroad. Grades were excellent, so universities offered full scholarships. When my acceptance letter arrived at home, the Chen family finally discovered my plans to attend college internationally. I thought my overly emotional parents would blame me for making independent decisions without consultation, like they had before. Surprisingly, their attitude toward me had changed drastically. They were suddenly sweet and caring, calling me a responsible, independent child. The truth was that with Jessica's medical treatments and expensive private tutoring for prestigious schools, the Chen family was financially drained. They had somehow learned about my art gallery, investments with the principal over the years, and shamelessly asked their underage daughter for money. I glanced at Michael, whose art degree left him unemployed and draining family finances further. "The family's broke. Why doesn't my brother get a job?" said. Jessica rushed to defend her beloved Michael, explaining he had turned down several positions because of caring for her. She was now calling him Michael instead of brother. And without my interference, Jessica and Michael had become romantically involved earlier in this life. From my bag, I took out a prepared bank card containing every penny the Chen family had spent on me since birth, including my parents' retirement funds. "Mom, Dad, this money is for your retirement," I said firmly. "If you give even 1 cent to Jessica, consider me permanently done as your daughter." The room tensed immediately as Jessica collapsed dramatically into Michael's arms, looking devastated.
Oh.
My father, furious, knocked the card to the floor and stomped on it angrily.
Oh.
"Then leave," he scolded, pointing toward the door. Once such a cold-hearted child in the Chen family, without hesitation, I took my signed certificate and left as I reached the door. I heard Jessica and Mom crying as if I was causing family drama. I couldn't help gazing at each fake face in the Chen family with cold disdain. "Am I cold-hearted?" I asked rhetorically. "Have you noticed that since Jessica arrived, I haven't appeared in a single family photo?" You hug Jessica and Michael with loving smiles while I'm completely excluded, just like this house has no space for me? My parents stared blankly at framed pictures throughout the living room, suddenly realizing the truth of my words. In every family photo displayed prominently, they embraced Jessica and Michael warmly while I was nowhere to be seen, erased from the visual narrative of our family history. Dragging my exhausted body back to the dormitory, interactions with the Chen family always left me feeling drained and irritated. To my surprise, Alex waited outside my door, leaping up excitedly when our eyes met, but then nervously pacing when he saw my expression. Finally, Alex, somewhat embarrassed, waved his acceptance letter. "Sarah, let's go abroad together for college." All preparation for studying internationally was expertly handled by the principal, the only person who truly cared about my future and well-being. Before leaving Portland, I had a heart-to-heart conversation with the principal that lasted all night. She recognized Alex's special feelings for me, but assured me that regardless of how romantic relationships developed, I would always be her cherished daughter. In college, I had no remaining ties to the Chen family, but they seemed to manage just fine using the bank card I had provided. Through old friends, I occasionally heard news about family developments, though they apparently were experiencing some difficulties. Jessica's kidney condition had worsened during her art college entrance examination, and without me present, she attempted switching her name onto another student's well-executed piece. Jessica then manipulated convincingly to get Dad influential in Portland's art circle to cover up the academic fraud. Fortunately, the artwork belonged to one of the main examiner's own students, and the scandal revealed not only academic dishonesty, but also questioned the ethics of the entire adoption situation. Jessica was permanently disqualified, dragging Dad's reputation down throughout the art world. All of Jessica's previous artwork became suspect for ghostwriting. Her carefully cultivated image as a sickly artistic genius was thoroughly questioned, and many previous buyers demanded full refunds. Ironically, my saintly father, who had adored Jessica, seemed to snap out of whatever spell had bound him. Perhaps his true affection had always been tied to the prestige and social recognition that came from raising such a celebrated prodigy. Unable to cope with the shame and loss of status, Jessica moved in with Michael permanently, and they soon became engaged. Michael sent me a wedding invitation, but I had no intention of sending gifts or flying back to attend their ceremony. 3 more years passed as Alex and I graduated and returned to Portland. I began studying under a renowned medical professor while Alex founded his company, helping the retired principal manage her gallery business. Life was busy and challenging at the hospital, but I always found time to see Alex regularly. Life felt full and genuinely happy for the first time in either of my existences. But one day, an uninvited guest shattered this peaceful existence. Michael and Mom burst into my professor's office, both in a state of complete hysteria. "Sarah, you have to save Jessica," Michael shouted desperately. "Her kidney condition has deteriorated rapidly, and now she's almost completely in renal failure. She can't handle the reality and has attempted suicide multiple times, but I've managed to stop her each attempt." "Sarah, you're studying medicine now, and your mentor is so accomplished," Mom cried, her voice breaking with desperation. "You too must be able to cure Jessica somehow. Please, if something happens to her, I won't want to live either." Professor, understanding the family situation, revealed that Jessica's condition was extremely rare, and that successful treatment was essentially unheard of in medical literature. Michael and Mom had heard this diagnosis before, after years of seeking help, so they had to understand the reality, but clearly they had lost all rational thinking. They pushed and shoved me without hesitation, their desperation making them aggressive and demanding. "How can you be so heartless? Are you just going to watch Jessica die?" Michael accused. "I should have known you'd act this way. You've been jealous of Jessica since we were children, so of course you won't help now. You can't even save your own family member. What's the point of studying medicine?" Mom added cruelly. "Someone as selfish as you doesn't deserve to be a doctor. You're a disgrace to the medical profession." There was already a crowd outside the office. Colleagues who had been unhappy with the professor's obvious favoritism toward me, and they were eager to see me humiliated and thrown out because of this family drama. Without hesitation, I slapped Michael across the face with enough force that his cheeks swelled immediately, causing Mom and all the onlookers to fall into shocked silence. "Selfish? Heartless? Jealous of Jessica?" I said, my voice carrying years of accumulated anger and pain. "You all said Jessica deserved pity, so I gave her my bedroom and moved into servants' quarters. You said she needed special care, so I attended school alone from age 7. You said her medical treatment was the priority, so I earned scholarships and never used family money. When Jessica sneezed, the entire family rushed her to emergency rooms. But when I had 102-degree fevers, nobody cared. You attended only Jessica's parent-teacher conferences and remembered only her birthdays. Anything she wanted, I was expected to give up immediately, even my own parents. Sure, she's had an unfortunate life, but I didn't cause her tragic circumstances or her illness. You question whether I should be a doctor? Every textbook I've used was purchased with my own money. I got into medical school through my own merit and found my own mentors. You've never cared about me even slightly, and now you think you have the right to act like concerned family." Years of suppressed grievances poured out in that moment, and the crowd's judgment shifted completely as they turned their disapproval toward Mom and Michael instead of me. Mom seemed to age decades in an instant, perhaps finally realizing that while she thought she had balanced everything perfectly, one daughter's cup had been completely empty while the others overflowed, feeling unburdened after finally speaking. My truth, I called security to have them removed from the hospital premises. Peace returned to my workplace, and from that day forward, colleagues seemed to regard me with newfound respect and understanding. Through dedicated hard work, I became the youngest attending physician in our hospital's history. Simultaneously, the gallery Alex and I co-founded with the principal became incredibly successful. Neither Alex nor I were particularly materialistic, so we donated much of our earnings to educational programs helping girls in rural areas who were forced to drop out of school. I occasionally sent my parents small financial allowances, but that remained our only connection. Later, I encountered Jessica on a Portland street, completely blind and walking alone with a white cane. With Michael working to support them both, she appeared to be back living with the Chen family. She who once looked at me with the confidence of a victor now had a colorless, defeated expression. The Chen family had once catered to her every whim, but now she was left to navigate the world independently. When I noticed some children preparing to throw rocks in Jessica's path, I kicked the obstacles away. I didn't pity Jessica or feel sorry for her current circumstances. She had brought this situation entirely upon herself through years of manipulation and dishonesty. If she hadn't cheated during art examinations, she might still be celebrated as the brave, resilient genius she had pretended to be. The Chen family might still love and pamper her exactly like before. Even though I was content with my current life, I wasn't forgiving Jessica for everything she had done to me and my family. I called Alex, asking him and the principal to join me for dinner that evening. The entire Chen family drama no longer mattered to me because these two people had become my real family, the most important individuals in my life. I had built a career I loved passionately and surrounded myself with people I could trust completely with my life and emotional well-being. This happiness belonged entirely to me, and absolutely no one could take it away or diminish it in any way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.